In this video, we'll take a look at some of the new features in Plant Pilot for managing comments. Now, Plant Pilot is a file-based system, and for that reason, you can end up with a lot of different files used by a lot of different users on a project, which is simple for the users, but also can make it challenging to manage your comment data for a project. So Plant Pilot has some new features that we think will help you with this. To show these new features, we'll go through a typical scenario involving several fictitious users on a project. To begin, let's imagine that I'm a user named Rick, and perhaps I'm a piping lead on the project. You can see here I have the model open and I have Plant Pilot open with my file. This is my personal Plant Pilot file, and perhaps I have saved some comments of my own into this file. Now, I received an email with another Plant Pilot file from a recent design review asking for my input for comments that were recorded in this design review. So I'm going to open this file that was generated from the design review, and this is my copy of that design review file. And in that file, I'll find that there are some comments that have been generated in the recent review. So if I look, there's a folder called 60% Review, and here are the comments in that folder. Now I can go through these comments one by one and open the comment to review it and decide what action I need to take. The first thing I would probably do with each one is look to see, is this even my area of responsibility? So this one, you see the discipline is CSA, it's not piping, so I can skip that one and I'll go to the next comment. And in this case, you can see there is a comment that's assigned to piping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign that comment to Bob in my group. And then also I want to add a response to this comment that maybe provides some instructions or guidance to Bob. Okay, so we've assigned this comment to Bob, and also we've provided some instruction on this comment. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to move to the next comment. And once again, we see that this is not a piping comment, this is an electrical comment, so no action is required on my part. So as you can see, we can go through these comments one by one, taking whatever actions we want to take. But in a real scenario, there might be many of these, and maybe perhaps I only want to look at those that are assigned to me. So that brings us to a new tool that we have in Plant Pilot called Comment Review. The Comment Review tool provides several new features. First of all, you can add multiple Plant Pilot files into the file list here and then be able to look at the comments from all of those files at one time. So if I click on a single file here, this is my personal Plant Pilot file with the comments that I had saved, and this is the copy of the file that was sent to me from the design review, and I can look at the comments in that file, or I can select all of the files in the list or multiple files in the list. However I decide, I want to pick and choose these files to look at the comments in those files. The other thing, it provides a grid interface to look at all of the data associated with each of these comments, and to be able to also edit that data in this interface. So it's one place to look at all of the data for all of the comments in as many different files as you select. The other thing is it gives you the ability to filter these, which is what I would like to do right now. I would like to look at the comments that were in this file that was sent to me from the design review, but I would like to only look at the piping comments, the comments that have been assigned to the piping discipline. So I can filter that by selecting discipline equals piping, and now I see, rather than going through all of these comments one by one as I was doing in Plant Pilot a minute ago, I can quickly filter to the comments that are important to me, and now come in here and take actions on those comments. So now I'll go through these comments from the Comment Review tool, opening each comment to look at it in the model, and then filling out whatever properties I need to fill out. So I'll assign this one to Sue. This one I will assign to Bob. This one I also will assign to Bob. Now for this next one, as I review comment number 10, I can see that there's a clash there, and they're asking that that clash be resolved. In this case, I'm going to do it a little different. I'm going to add a response here that says CSA to look at resizing steel. And I'm actually going to change this discipline to be CSA. Now you'll notice that once I change that, it is removed from the list because I do have the filter showing only piping. So if I turn my filter off, we can see that indeed in comment 10 there, we have added a response and changed the discipline. So you can add responses and view responses for comments in this comment review tool if you like, and you can turn those responses on or off using the toolbar button. So that concludes just the first step in our scenario, and to recap that, Rick, a piping lead on the project, received some comments from a recent design review, and using the new comment review tool in Plant Pilot was able to very quickly review the comments that were assigned to his department and take further actions on those comments. For the next step in our scenario, let's imagine that now I'm Bob, a piping designer. You can see here I have the model open, I have Plant Pilot open with my own personal Plant Pilot file, and I've made my own comments in this file. But now I've received an email from Rick with an attachment of the Plant Pilot file containing the design review comments, and Rick has asked me to follow up on the comments that are assigned to me. So in this case, I feel like I want to have the comments that are assigned to me copied into my own file. So I'm going to use another new tool in Plant Pilot called Import Comments. And I'm going to select the file that Rick sent me where he had modified the design review comments. And you can see here there are a lot of comments in this file, and in reality, from a design review, there would be many more than this. But what I can do is I can filter this to show only the comments that are assigned to me. And so now you can see I only have these 3 comments, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to import these into my Plant Pilot data file. And Plant Pilot can figure out if these are new comments to your data file or if they were existing comments. These could be comments that, that were previously sent by you to someone else, and now you're bringing them back into your file. But in this case, these are all new comments. So I want to add these comments to my file, and you have some renumbering options here if you would like to renumber these comments as they're imported. Now, if importing these comments using the numbering options that you've specified here would cause a duplicate number, Plant Pilot will tell you that and will require you to use one of the renumbering options to avoid duplicates. And then I can import these comments into the same folder that they exist in within the source document, or I can specify a folder that I want to import these into. But I'm going to say import these into the same folder as the source. And now you can see a new folder was created called 60% Review, and the comments that were assigned to me from Rick are now in my PPLT file. So now I can go through each one of these comments and look at it. Here's comment number 2. It says rotate operator to the west. Now if you look down here in the responses, you can see the response that was added by Rick, don't intrude into the access space. So I'm going to change the status of this response to in design. I'm going to change the forecast completion date to June 1. And then I'm also going to add a new sub-response. I'll say rotating 45 degree only. And you can see that I've created a new sub-response under the response that Rick created. So you can create these response threads as many levels deep as you need to. So I'm going to apply these changes, and let's go look at the next one. And in this case, it says add check valve per P&ID, so I am going to change that status to in design. give it a completion date, apply that change, move to the next one, and again the same thing. I'm going to make the status in design and the completion date of maybe a year from now. Okay, and then I'll save my changes. And so Bob has quickly imported the comments that were sent to him from Rick that were assigned to him, ignoring all the other ones that were not assigned to him, and updated the status of those comments. For the next step in our example, imagine that I'm Rick again, and I want to import the comments that were assigned to me from the design review session with the input that I received from Bob. So I'm going to use the import tool once again, and I'm going to open Bob's file. And now again I'm going to use the filter, and in this case I'm going to filter to find only comments that were generated in the design review. So here are the comments. And in this case, Plant Pilot recognizes that these comments already exist in my file, because as you recall, I received this file from the design review session. I assigned some of the comments to Bob. I sent it to Bob, and then he imported the comments into his file and provided the input, and now I'm importing that input back into my file. So I have several options if I want to update the comments that are in my file with the data from these comments. First of all, I have an option of whether I want to add new responses or not. So if Bob has added any new responses, I'm going to bring those into my file. And then I have an option of whether I want to overwrite existing properties of the comments in my file. And I can do all properties or only blank properties in my file, or I can do selected properties. So since I've asked Bob to provide a forecast completion date and a status, I'm just going to import those properties into my file. So now if we look at, for example, comment number 2, indeed you can see that Bob's forecast completion date and status in design have been imported into my file. And in addition, the response that he created is also in the file. Now for the final step in our scenario, let's imagine that I'm the person that's responsible for managing the comments that were generated initially from the design review. So you can see here I have the model open and I have Plant Pilot open. Now I have no data file open in Plant Pilot. I can use the comment review tool regardless of whether I have a data file open in the Plant Pilot main window or not. So I'm going to add my design review file. So this is the file in which the original comments from the design review session were saved. And for our scenario, we're going to imagine that the comments that were assigned to the electrical discipline have already been updated with input from that electrical discipline. So you can see some of the fields are populated here for those comments that have discipline as electrical. Now, let's imagine that I want to bring in the input from Rick, which was the input for piping, and that there's also some input available from Jane for the structural comments. So I'm going to add those files to my comment review tool as well. So here you can see I've now got 3 files in this list, and I can pick and choose any combination of these files to show all of the comments for those files. Now, the first thing I might want to do is say, okay, I'm going to import all of the responses that Jane may have added to her comments. So I'm going to copy her comments to my design review master file. But in this case, I'm only going to say add the new responses. And then I'm going to do the same thing for Rick's file. I'm going to select all of the comments and I'm going to copy them to what we're calling the design review master file, and I only want to add the new responses. So if we look at my file now, the master file. And as an example, let's look at comment number 10 here, which was a clash. You can see that Rick made a comment, CSA to look at resizing the steel. And Jane also made a comment, no piping is going to move the pipe. So, in this case, both of them have added responses to that comment. And by importing the responses there, we were able to see, just the responses from both files are added into my master file. Same thing with comment number 2, where earlier we made some responses and sub-responses. Those are now obviously a part of my file. Now, obviously, when I imported the responses from Rick's file and from Jane's file, I could have also imported property data. We showed that in a previous portion of this demo. But there are times when, rather than blindly importing the data, you would like to look at what's in two files and be able to see where there are differences and pick and choose where you want to copy values from one file to another. So what you can do is you can select these files here in this list, and you can go into compare mode, and then you'll see that the values in the grid are color-coded. So first of all, the gray bars represent comments that are in the master file. So whatever is the topmost file in the list, which in this case is my design review master file. So what I'm saying is I want to see where properties in these other files that I have here are different than what I have in my master file. So you can see red values indicates values that are different. Blue indicates property values that are in the primary file but not in either one of the secondary files. And green indicates values that are in the secondary files but not in the primary files. So you can see here that I have some, like for instance, the input from the electrical discipline was clearly not in either one of the other files, so that is blue. And you can see that some of the values are different, so those are red. And so using this tool, you can quickly get an idea of what the differences are and which properties you want to bring in. So what I want to do now is, clearly at this point, I'm not really interested in the electrical stuff, so I'm going to say filter that where discipline is not electrical. Okay, and now I'm only looking at the piping and structural input from Rick and Jane. So for instance, here in Jane's file, she has assigned this comment to Al and given a completion date and said that that value is now in design, or the status. So what I can do is, using this tool, I can copy and paste individual values rather than doing a bulk import as we showed before. So now you can see that these values match with Jane's. Now this one is still red because in Rick's file, Rick did not edit the structural comment, so that's why his says new, but we can visually see what we're doing here and understand which ones we want to copy and paste into our file. So that's another way to get data into a file rather than doing a bulk import of property data. Using this approach, you can get a visual indication of which properties are different and which ones you want to copy into your file. Now another comparison you might want to do between files is to show me comments that exist in one file that don't exist in my file. So that's one of the options in compare mode, is show me comments that are not in my primary file, for example. Now in this case there are none, but let's exit compare mode and let's add Rick's personal Plant Pilot data file to our list here. And in this case, I'm going to select only my master file and Rick's file. I'm going to go back to compare mode, and I've got the option selected to show me comments that are not in the primary file. So this tells me right away that these comments are in Rick's PPLT file, and they are not in my master file. So I can pick and choose if I want to bring those in, but if I want to bring them in, obviously the same way we've done this earlier is I just would say copy to my file. And it does want you to save any changes that you've made before you do that. And now you can see, as we showed before, these are going to be new comments coming into my file. That concludes this demo of the new features for managing comments in Plant Pilot. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of how these new features can be used to manage comments that might appear in multiple Plant Pilot data files. Now, the intent was not to define a process that you should use, but simply to show you the features that are available to you now to help you better manage all the comments that are generated on a project. And hopefully you can come up with your own processes then that will work for you. Thanks for watching.